In 2003, a woman died alone in a locked penthouse on the 34th floor. Most people who disappear from public life do so quietly. They sell the house, cancel the memberships, stop returning calls. They slip out through the side door of their own existence. Eleanor Voss didn't disappear. She withdrew. There's a difference. For the last 11 years of her life, she lived on the 34th floor of the Aldrich Tower in downtown, a building her late husband Gerald Voss had commissioned in 1978. She had groceries delivered. She had a housekeeper, a woman named Miriam Cho, who came 3 times a week. She had a lawyer named Preston Hale, who visited every second Tuesday. That was it. That was the entire perimeter of Eleanor Voss's world. This is the Voss Inheritance. My name is Cassandra Maddox, and over the next several episodes, I'll be walking you through one of the most quietly unsettling mysteries I've ever come across. A dead woman, a fortune with nowhere to go, and a circle of people who all seem to have made the same decision: to disappear. On the morning of October 14th, 2003, Miriam Cho arrived for her Tuesday shift and found Eleanor in her bedroom armchair, hands folded in her lap, eyes open. The medical examiner ruled it cardiac arrest, natural causes. She was 74 years old. That should have been the end of the story. But then the will was read, and everything that had seemed orderly and quiet about Eleanor Voss's death became something else entirely. Eleanor Voss left behind an estate valued at approximately $40 million. Real estate, investments, art holdings, the accumulated wealth of a family that had spent 40 years quietly shaping the skyline of this city. She left none of it to her children, not a dollar, not a piece of furniture, not a photograph. Her 3 adult children, Daniel Voss, 49, a corporate attorney, Caroline Voss Hartley, 46, who had worked in her mother's charitable circles her entire adult life, and Marcus Voss, 41, the youngest and reportedly closest to Eleanor, received a single line in the document: "To my children, I leave my love, and nothing more, as they will understand in time." The entire estate, all $40 million, was directed to a charitable foundation called the Aldrich Endowment for Urban Preservation. Now, here's where it gets strange. The Aldrich Endowment had no public footprint, no website, no IRS filings accessible to the press, no office address, only a P.O. box registered to a building on the west side of the city. No listed employees, no board of directors, no press releases, no charity galas. Nothing. For a foundation set to receive $40 million, it had left almost no evidence that it existed at all. The only person who could explain the foundation was Eleanor's attorney, Preston Hale, the man who had drafted the will, witnessed the signature, and filed it with the court. Preston Hale was 58 years old in October of 2003. He had practiced estate law for 31 years. He had a small firm, a solid reputation, and no history of anything irregular in his professional record. He gave one statement to the press following the will's contested filing. He said, and I'm quoting here from the City Tribune archives, he described the foundation as a legitimate entity established by Eleanor Voss according to her own wishes, and said all questions would be answered in due time through proper legal channels. 2 weeks later, Preston Hale closed his office. He settled his remaining client cases with referrals to other firms. He sold his home in the Westfield neighborhood. He forwarded his mail. And then, as far as public record is concerned, Preston Hale ceased to exist. He has not appeared in any court filing, property record, tax document, or news archive since November 2003. He did not die. At least, there is no death certificate on file in this state, or in any of the 6 surrounding states I checked. He simply left. The Voss children filed a formal challenge to the will in January of 2004. Their argument was straightforward. Eleanor had displayed signs of diminished capacity in her final years. The foundation was unverifiable. The will was the product of undue influence by a party unknown. The case had traction. Legal analysts at the time suggested the children had a reasonable claim. The foundation's opacity alone was unusual enough to raise questions. The case ran for 4 years, and then, on March 3rd, 2008, a Tuesday, all 3 children withdrew their challenge simultaneously. Same day, through 3 different attorneys, with no public statement. Caroline Voss Hartley gave a brief comment to a local reporter outside the courthouse. She said the family had decided to respect their mother's wishes. She did not take questions. She did not look at the camera. I want you to hold on to that image. A woman who spent 4 years fighting for what she believed was rightfully hers, standing on courthouse steps, telling the world she'd decided to let it go. And she cannot look at the camera. In the years that followed, Daniel Voss quietly wound down his law practice. Marcus Voss relocated twice, once to a city out west, once to a small coastal town. Caroline disappeared from the social circles she had spent decades cultivating. All 3 of them, within 18 months of dropping the case, had made themselves smaller, less visible, harder to find. Now I want to tell you about Miriam Cho. Miriam was Eleanor's housekeeper for 9 years. She cleaned the penthouse, managed deliveries, and by all accounts was the person Eleanor Voss saw most frequently in the final decade of her life. She was, in a very real sense, Eleanor's closest human contact. After Eleanor's death, Miriam gave one interview, to a local lifestyle magazine that was running a memorial piece on the Voss family legacy. Most of the interview covered ordinary things: Eleanor's routines, her habits, her fondness for a particular brand of Earl Grey tea. But near the end of the piece, Miriam said something that the journalist apparently didn't think much of. It appears almost as an aside, a single line buried in the 3rd to last paragraph. She said that Eleanor had a visitor every Thursday night, regular as a clock, she said, for years. Someone who came late, around 10 or 11 p.m., and who never, not once, came through the front door. The journalist didn't follow up on it. The magazine moved on to other subjects. I've spent 3 weeks trying to locate Miriam Cho. Her last known address was an apartment on the north side of the city, which she vacated in early 2004. She has no active phone listing, no social media presence, though that's less surprising for someone of her generation. No property records in the city or the surrounding county. I did find a forwarding address on file, a relative's home about 2 hours north. When I wrote a letter to that address, it came back unopened. Return to sender. Miriam Cho, like Preston Hale and like the Voss children themselves, appears to have simply receded. The P.O. box registered to the Aldrich Endowment for Urban Preservation was located on the 1100 block of Garner Street, in what used to be a mixed-use commercial building. I say used to be because that building no longer exists. Permit records show it was demolished in April of 2004, 6 months after Eleanor's death, and right in the middle of the children's legal challenge. The listed reason for demolition was structural instability following an inspection. I pulled that inspection report. the building had received a clean bill of health in a routine city review just 14 months earlier. The lot sat empty for 9 years. It was eventually sold to a development company, one with no connection, on paper, to the Voss family or the Aldrich endowment. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. The P.O. Box, the only physical address ever associated with a $40 million foundation, was registered to a building that no longer exists. The man who could explain that foundation has vanished. The people who were closest to Eleanor Voss have all, in their own ways, made themselves impossible to find. And the man who registered that P.O. box in the first place, the original signatory on the box's paperwork, his name is listed in city records as Harold Greer. Harold Greer died in 1971. I don't know yet who was coming through Eleanor Voss's door every Thursday night. I don't know why 3 children, after 4 years of fighting, walked away on the same morning without a word. I don't know how a dead man's name ended up on the paperwork of a foundation that received $40 million. But I know this. Eleanor Voss withdrew from the world on her own terms. She controlled every variable of her final years: the visitors, the routine, the documents. A woman that deliberate doesn't write a will by accident. She knew exactly what she was doing. The question is whether she was protecting something or someone. Next episode, we go deeper into the Aldrich endowment. What little paper trail it left behind points toward a name, and that name connects to a real estate deal that was never supposed to become public. If you're still here, you're one of the curious ones. Stick around. The next mystery's already waiting.